Hello there. This is a compilation of the first 4 episodes of The Cold Road. The 5th episode of The Cold Road is going to be coming out this Friday, so keep an eye out and enjoy the video.
All right, let's do it. A rickety carriage grinds up the cold road. Its occupants try and sit, bouncing wildly on velvet seats, cursing shifty Wick. It was his fault they were in these godforsaken mountains. They were personally sent by Clearbrum, the unmasked lord, to capture Wick. The official charge was slander, but Sweet Willem, Dave, and Wades in Shadows knew the truth. Wick had stolen a piece of Helgar's spear, a terrifying artifact whose value is only outstripped by its potential to destabilize the entirety of Faerun. William and the Dragonborn had managed to capture him too, 7 times. Say what you want about Wick, but he's a slippery motherfucker. So far, Wick framed another Kenku, turned Sweet William's Raven against him, ambushed the team with Wade's old enemies, the Ulrith Nar, and in one particularly brutal escape, he cut off all their legs. The restoration was not cheap. In the past 6 months chasing Wick, they've been humiliated, imprisoned twice, framed for burning down an inventor's workshop, lost more than 3,000 gold, a coat of warmth, Wade's cherished blink arrow, Willem's invisible dagger, and more horses than they can count, a war goat, and not to mention their 2 companions Zir and Ulka, leaving only 2 Dragonborn left on the team. Every night they collectively traded hateful tales of the Kenku thief, and every day they rattled farther and farther north. They spent most of their remaining gold on an expert driver and a carriage. That's when they came upon it, a familiar war goat, Wick's mount, frozen to the ground. They told their driver to stop the cart. Sweet William took point and jumped out of the carriage. He checked it. Wick wasn't there, but he'd left his saddlebags, obviously in a hurry. His tracks were already fading. Willem opened up the bags and heard a chick. He spotted a trap wire.
Oh, God!
The goat exploded like some kind of grotesque fragmentation grenade. The cart was hit with a wave of frozen gristle, and when it bounced back to level, Wade popped his head out of the window.
Find anything good?
He made a perception check 18. He saw a tiny speck of gray against the white snow. Wick had a good 5-hour head start, but they had a cart. The driver knew the area pretty well and pointed out that Wick was about to hit Horseshoe Canyon. Its center was a town, but that was a good 10 hours on foot. They'd catch Wick in 3. And so they took off. The horses warded against the cold, the wheels mending themselves, and the driver in a state somewhere between fury and bliss. After 2 hours, they caught up with Wick, shuffling towards the edge of the canyon. Wade climbed to the roof of the cart and took out his bow. He was going to wing the little rat in the leg if he could. That's when he noticed one of the nearby snow mounds shift and move. A full-grown winter wolf with a pack of pups, getting ready for the kill. This presented a dilemma. They could let the wolf have her meal and this would all be over. They probably wouldn't be able to recover the artifact and maybe wouldn't get the reward, but he'd be dead. Or they could save Wick. Dave leaned out of the back of the cart, his scales bristling in the freezing wind, and he started to play his war drum like a goddamn champion. He conjured up the illusion of a dragon silently slinking over the side of the canyon. The winter wolves were terrified and started dispersing. Just then, there was a rumbling noise, coming from down below. Wade looked over as Wick spread his arms wide and started tilting over the edge. Kenku cannot fly, but Wick seems to have found a loophole. Do you remember the Inventor's Workshop from earlier? The Kenku spread his haphazardly strapped vellum wings, and they filled with an updraft. Wick closed his eyes and began to fly. Well, glide. Then from the chasm another thunderous rumble erupted. Under the cart, ice began to crack and tilt. Dave yelled, "Oh, we got a big boy," and they did. The same illusion that scared away the wolves lured something much, much worse. It had a head the size of a tavern and a body to match. The monstrosity scrambled after the cart, screaming out strikes of thunder and lightning that split the ground. Sweet William leaned out the window, looked back at the enormous reptilian thing, and then forward to see Wick gently gliding towards the quaint hunter's village of Horseshoe Town. William knocked an arrow, aimed low to catch the draft, and in a moment of pure being, narrowed his perception to a single point, the base of Wick's foot. Then released. Nat 20, sneak attack, non-lethal. The arrow threaded up Wick's leg and it split open like a watermelon, tendons whipping like tassels in the wind. Wick went limp. Choosing non-lethal just means they don't have to stabilize to live. It doesn't mean they stay conscious. They wanted Wick to live, 50-50 chance of Wick surviving in one piece. 65. He hit the other side of the canyon, slid down, and settled 50 feet down on a small outcropping of ice. Thank God, I guess? I don't know. Dave took a second look at the terror that was chasing them and remembered. Something any bronze dragonborn might, a children's tale of the monsters which giants wrought and dragons killed. This was a proto-Behir, and not just any Behir, Gragnall the Strained, one of the oldest and most flawed. "Hit it behind the knees!" Dave yelled. Wade was immediately on it. He waited for an opening, and the Behir obliged. Just a flash, showing the juicy soft spot at the back of its bloated little leg. He fired and hit. The whole animal shuddered in pain and started gliding back, and slid back down the chasm. The team was safe, but they had to make it to Horseshoe Village before the little bastard got away again, and it was a nerve-wracking 3-hour drive. They'd finally gotten him. I mean, maybe, this time. They were all terrified that I'd pull a dick DM move and the Kenku just wouldn't be there when they arrived. And they were only half right. The team eventually made it to the hunting village. The smell of oiled furs and sour meat hung over the place. It was more of a camp than a town, with a few sheds, but the only permanent structure was a massive cylindrical longhouse tavern. After parking the cart, the driver hopped out and started walking towards the tavern. Willem cut him off. "Jim, good job out there. While you're in the tavern, could you pick up some food and some supplies for us?" Willem put 5 gold into Jim's hand. "What?" Supplies, food, potions." "You realize I'm a driver, right? Not like a servant?" Yeah, Wade slid into the conversation.
Very good work back there. Thank you. We are in your debt.
And palmed him a couple extra coins. Jim turned around and started towards the tavern. "I'll do my best." The team started asking around, assuming Wick must have gotten into town by now, but nobody really had seen him except for Father Grigor Brum, a priest who directed them to the south of town and invited Dave to join him later and talk over matters of spirit. Dave, believing Father Brum had access to some kind of divine insight, was more than happy to oblige, but finding Wick was a little more pressing. After searching the edges of Horseshoe Town, they eventually found his pathetic little body. And as Wick took in ragged, shallow breaths, Dave rigged up some pythons and rope from Wade's pack. When he lowered down, Wick looked up at him pleadingly and extended a small hand. "Yeah, I'm here to save you, but you've got a lot to answer for when we get up there." They dragged Wick up to the town, plopped him on the ground. As it happened so many times before, it became clear that Wick had stowed the spearhead somewhere. Wick pointed at his bag. Wade grabbed it and looked inside. There was a blink arrow, an invisible dagger, and a set of 4 cigars, each with a different colored band. Wick pointed at the black banded cigar. Wade, knowing not to trust Wick with anything from the pack, inspected the cigars more closely. Each cigar had language on it and herbs within it, which suggested particular schools of magic. The black band was clearly some kind of healing cigar. The yellow abjuration, green conjuration, and the blue, he couldn't tell.
No.
Wade pocketed the cigars.
It's not time to celebrate yet.
Dave slapped Wick and yelled, "Where's the spear?" Before Wick had time to answer, punched him again. Wick went limp. They took the opportunity to tie the Kenku up. Then Dave pulled out a dulcimer and started noodling out a rendition of Tabacs in the Cradle that would bring an outlander to tears. And to the beat of every pluck, the Kenku's splayed nub curled back into a shape that almost resembled a leg, and Wick opened his eyes, then looked at the ropes. Kenku can't speak, but can only mimic sounds they've heard, and as this Kenku hadn't heard much speech for a while, he started with what he knew. "The spear!" "Yeah, I'm here to save you, but the spear! You've got a lot to answer for when we get up there." A little baffled, the team took a second to take that in. Then they realized that they had to start feeding him vocabulary to get the info they needed. As they started shouting out random bits and bobs, Willem started going through Wick's additional bags. He found 2 gold bars and a heart-shaped locket. Hungry for a little more info on the little bastard, Willem popped the locket open. There was a clap and a burst of thick smoke. Con saves all around. Openly rolled, Wick aced his, but of course Wade, Dave, and Willem got knocked out. They woke up 2 hours later, cold and Kenkuless. His hobbled tracks led back to the outcropping he'd been unconscious on. They got ready to climb down on their pythons from before, but double-checked them. Wick had loosened them in case he was followed. Finally, they knocked the pythons back in deeper and climbed down to inspect it. He had hit the spear in the snow down there. There was a little wedge where he had taken it out. And so, the search for Wick began again. After much tent searching, Wade pretended to look for his grandma, and Dave, of course, thick as a brick, just kept yelling, "Wick!" They gave up and went into the tavern, where Jim greeted them with 2 capes made out of rats, 3 vials of 1d4 healing potions, and 4 gold's worth of limes. That's a lot of limes. They eventually found someone who had seen the Kenku talking to one of the frost goblins who lived in a cave nearby. They also learned from the local law enforcement it was basically open season on the Gobos, and the local poison maker would buy their salivary glands, prized for their ability to make wraith oil, a blade oil used against incorporeal creatures. They had learned the frost goblins had a soft spot at the back of their head, which is essentially like an off switch. Think a Seagal movie, basically. They also knew the frost goblins had apparently been getting smarter, obsessing over some kind of dig, coming into town to sell strange, often cursed items, and now not coming into town at all and being extremely aggressive to the residents. The team waited on the edge of town, looking down on another ledge that led from the cliffside into the goblin's cave, waiting for an opening in between guards. When he left, they started moving into the caves, in search of Wick. Unfortunately, Dragonborn don't have night vision, and each Dragonborn had a different solution to this problem. Wade's in shadows, well, he did as his name suggests, which was essentially groped around in the dark, keeping his lantern hooded at almost all times. Whereas Dave, well, he just popped out his lantern and happily roamed the halls, which of course eventually backfired. 3 goblins sat in a circle, rolling strange dice. Each time they hit the ground, the dice would flash with bright, searing light. The goblins cheered and tallied up scores. Suddenly, while one of them was mid-toss, a different kind of light shone down the hall, and they heard as Dave's lantern clanged against the wall. They jumped to their feet, one started screaming for help, and Dave ran forward, opened his maw, and let loose a crack of lightning, which killed the other 2 instantly. The third ran full tilt down the hall and managed to bypass both Wade and Willem. They fired off a few shots, but they missed. Wade accidentally used his blink arrow and teleported himself into a goblin's cooking fire. The goblin next to him, a different one than the screamer, stabbed him and then also stumbled into the fire. In agony, Wade took this opportunity to grab the poor little guy by his feet and swing him into the cave wall. The goblin hit the wall with a crunch and then sizzled as his limp body hit the floor. The team went running after the alarm goblin, but he got away, and so they decided, you know what, stealth screwed up, we're going to set up an ambush. But what they didn't realize is they hadn't finished clearing out the first fork of the cavern. When the goblins finally came, they did so in force. A warlock frost goblin at the head of a flank of 5 goblins with javelins. Then from behind their ambush, another 4 goblins from the fork that was not cleared out earlier, and they came with their own javelins. The team was stuck. All 3 of them got porcupined in the first round, and then as the goblins went to retrieve their javelins, Sweet Willem killed the warlock, clearly their leader. Wade spun around, opened up his lantern, and temporarily blinded the other 4 as they launched their volley. And finally, Dave created an illusion of a dwarf in the hopes of soaking up some of the damage, but it wasn't enough. 3 rounds later, they'd blown through all of their healing potions. Wade had 3 HP, Dave was down, and Sweet Willem had 5 HP left. The frost goblins were all retreating back to their javelin piles to get another volley, and from the darkness they heard, "You've got a lot to answer for when we get up there." They were surrounded. Dave, their only healer, was down. Wade had 3 HP, and Sweet William looked back. Frost goblins in formation, readying another volley of spears. He looked at Wade's bandolier. The cigars they'd stolen from Shifty Wick were still there. The cigars had magic properties. They were each labeled by color. They didn't know what they did, but they knew that black was for life magic. William lit the cigar and started sliding towards Dave. Welcome to this episode of the Animated Spellbook, brought to you by Elderwood Academy. Healing Word. Healing Word is a pretty basic healing spell afforded to clerics, druids, and bards. With a range of 60 feet, the caster can use a bonus action to speak their healing word, and heal an ally for 1d4 plus their spell modifier. William let loose a plume of thick black smoke. Dave's nostrils filled, his body started to rattle and then float. His lungs heaved as they filled with the smoke. William hit the ground, 0 HP. Dave was up. Their HP pool switched.
Oh, that's what that does.
Dave lit and threw an oil flask. The oil ignited and blocked off a side passage. He ran past it. The frost goblins hissed the bright light. They'd be at disadvantage. There might be 10 frost goblins in the cave, but there are only 2 between Dave and freedom. He ran forward like a bulldozer. Wade jumped to Sweet William, threw him over a shoulder, and then started to run. It was the goblin's turn. He could hear Wick barking orders in Primordial. The 5 goblins behind them let loose a volley. Wade felt 3 dull thumps, but didn't feel the tip of a spear. He also heard the clattering of spears down the flaming side hallway. They were readying attacks for when he went by. Up ahead, Dave was face to face with 2 goblins. They both took wild jabs, pathetic attempts. He brought his mace down and crushed one of their skulls. The second barely ducked out of the way. William went still. he was dead. Wade took one last look at his friend.
Good night, sweet William.
And slid him across the ice. Sweet William was perforated by 2 spears, then gently drifted into the flames. Just as Wade's and Shadows sprinted past, Sweet William's oil flasks ignited. With a roar, the remaining goblin between Dave and Freedom disengaged and made a run for it. When Dave and Wade caught up to the little bastard, he looked up at them pleadingly, then looked at their still suspended ropes as if to say, "I'm leaving, and so should you." And with that, Dave and Wade climbed up without their selfless rogue. Oh, did you think that this encounter would have healing word in it? So did I, but Dave forgot he had enough spell slots. He's a new player, but by the time we figured out the flub, William was very, very dead. The team returned to the Horseshoe Village Tavern, having narrowly escaped with their lives.
Hey, you guys look like shit. Well, let me introduce you to my new friend, Lieutenant Vincent Skittles.
Hey, get in the legs.
And Lieutenant Vincent Skittles, let me introduce you to my employers. This is Wade's and Shadows. This is Dave. And, hey, clear run, get my boys a drink. They clearly got their asses handed them by that crow. Bore 3, the runt's always a little behind. So it'll be here in a second. Wade shook his head at Jim, and glassy-eyed started limping over to the bar. He saw something. Orcs. And not just any orcs. The Ulrith Nar. Now, to understand how this affected him, you need to know that today wasn't the first time Wade's had lost a friend in battle. Life for a Dragonborn can be difficult. They're often born of different species, and in many cases shunned by their own families and communities. So, they often have to form their own family ties. Wade's and Shadows took his first family in the form of a unit in the Damaran military. His first real loss was against the Ulrith Nar. He was the sole survivor of that clash, and ever since, every chance he got to cull the herd, he took. Unfortunately, he was too hurt to do anything tonight. He was intrigued, though, by their drinking companion, a silver dragonborn, trading stories in Orcish with the Ulrith Nar. Quintus Flavius Aurelius was wearing the signature armor of Zentil Keep, but all the marks of rank had been torn off, and he knew the look of a soldier who'd lost a friend. More importantly, he knew the look of a crew in need of a mercenary, and so that night, the drinks were on Quintus. Wade's, Quintus, Skittles, Jim, Clearrun the Barkeep, and even the Ulrith Nar drank to the memory of Sweet William and others lost. They gambled, laughed, played music, of course they fought. And, to their amazement, they also learned that the rumors about the Unmasked Lord's daughter had reached all the way up the cold road to Horseshoe Village. The following morning, sprawled randomly through the tavern, the team woke up to the smell of yak titlam, a traditional Waterdavian breakfast made by the barkeep who'd come up a bit dusty, but thought after the crew had a night like that, they might use some grease. Wade's drunkenly lurched into action, ready to kill one of the Ulrith Nar now that he was a little rested up, but they were already gone to their tents. Quintus, however, was sitting, legs crossed, the very picture of crisp composure.
When do you want to head out?
Huh?
Well, now that I'm in your employ.
We hired you.
Yes, sir.
What's your relationship to the Ulrith Nar?
Friendly.
And if it came to it, whose side would you be on?
You hired me. So yours. Speaking of hiring, you also hired him.
Quintus nudged Skittles with a foot. Then, they ate their greasy meal and shook off their hangovers before heading to the Frost Goblin Cave. The same cave that they'd lost a friend in yesterday, the same cave that housed their target and sworn enemy Shifty Wick. A small, almost weirdly localized storm covered their entry, and so Skittles shot 2 bolts at the little bastard guarding the entrance, and they landed. They moved into the second chamber and tried to repeat this move on 2 goblins. Dave started the ambush with a powerful miss, and Waits fired his crossbow. It also missed, cracking the ice in one of the walls. Skittles accidentally shot Dave in the leg, and finally Quintus dove into action and beheaded the goblin with a single swipe. But it was too late. The goblin screamed out a warning before being cleaved by one of Dave's throwing axes.
Hilletje!
They heard the warning repeated down the tunnel. Then strange orders being shouted in weird, clipped, and incompatible goblin tones. Dave rolled to retrieve his hand axe with a sickening squelch and waited for the incoming horde. And waited. And a few minutes passed. The team eventually came to the conclusion that an ambush was surely waiting down the hall.
After last time, they had no intention of being lured into a trap again, and so they fed the campfire and waited for a few hours. Wades eventually pulled the arrow from the cracked wall. There was a centuries-old frozen humanoid figure in the cloudy ice behind the crack. Wades took a look at one of the frost goblin corpses. This was a kind of dig site. The goblins had been excavating something, and so each goblin had a crooked little pickaxe on its belt. Wades grabbed the goblin's pickaxe. It was barely bigger than a rock hammer, but he, Quintus, and Dave started taking turns unearthing this weird, frozen figure. Using their torch to soften the ice, they would then use their comically small goblin pickaxe to chip it away. Hours later, while everyone else was resting, and just as the orange tinge of sunset flooded the cave entrance, Wades finally broke through, pulling back a chunk of ice, which made a kind of window to her head and upper torso. The frozen figure beneath had her hands clasped over her sternum, and a small obsidian necklace depicting an aboleth twisting in a jagged spiral. Wades, an old-school loot-and-shoot rogue, pried the frozen figures off to reveal a blade. He secreted away the blade before anyone could see, and as he did, he heard something in primordial resonate through his bones.
Vlees na die lem, gees na tarisdoen.
A little rattled, he looked back to his companions.
She's some kind of priestess.
They gathered around the hole to marvel at this ancient priestess unearthed after centuries. Who was she? Who did she worship? Were her eyes open before? No! A dead frost goblin suddenly attacked. Dave screeched with fear and horror as the frost goblin savaged one of Dave's arms. His slack jaw clamped down and tore away a mouthful of scales and tendons. The team jumped into action. They looked around and saw one undead frost goblin tearing at Dave, another shambling towards them, the frozen priestess sluggishly pawing and snapping at Wades, and then they saw on the ground the headless goblin started to convulse and his chest snapped open like a bear trap, organs spiraling out, hemorrhaging a glowing purple substance. Quintus beheaded Dave's attacker before he got a chance to chew. Skittles fired a crit success into the other shambler, and Dave finished the job with his mace. Wades took one look at the priestess and put her out of her misery. As they were catching their breath, they saw a kind of vital essence pulling itself from the headless goblin. A glowing form. A wraith. And as it wove itself out of the goblin's body, the team took a look at the zombies they dispatched, who were also starting to writhe. Their sternum snapped open, and their organs began to boil out of their bodies. Could they survive? One wraith? Maybe. Two wraiths? Sure, possibly. Four wraiths? Oh my god, is that a Sweet William zombie? Yes, it is. They made a run for the exit, and as they did, the wraiths gave chase. The first one was overenthusiastic and burned in the setting sunlight. It hissed and receded back into the dark. The team started climbing. The sun doesn't set all at once. First, the shadows get longer. Well, the shadows of the western cliffs were chasing our players as they climbed back up to Horseshoe Village. Quintus, the heaviest and most athletic of the group, had a run of bad luck and lost his footing. He was at the rear of the climb. He looked back. The wraiths were swimming along the shadows' border, getting closer and closer with each handhold. He got up to the top barely in time, the rest of the group only 30 feet ahead of him. Quintus, Wades and Shadows, Skittles, and Dave tried to outrun the sun to get to the center of Horseshoe Village. Dave and Skittles made it first, screaming, "Wraiths!" They saw the locals getting the first volley ready, dropped pots of wraith oil at their feet, and readied their bows. Wades and Quintus had Shadows on their heels. Wades shot his blink arrow to the tavern.
Safe.
Quintus saw the first volley of the villagers' arrows streak through the sky. He put up his shield, and as he did, he felt the cold touch of the wraith on his shoulder.
Onder die groot glitser lê die ysvader. 'n Druppel van sy bloed is genoeg om die see te vries. As hy nie kon ontsnap nie, hoe kan jy?
The arrows rained down on them, and the wraiths all suddenly changed course and moved back towards the caves, where the frost goblins would reap what they had sown. So, the team faced the same choice that started the very first adventure. Should they try and save Shifty Wick, or leave him to his own fate? Thanks for watching. This episode took a long time to put together, and I wanted a special thanks for Pete O'Morgan at Dice and Brews on Instagram for being Wades and Shadows, and also thanks to Hilletje Moller Bashew for her creepy voice work. By the way, the wraiths in this were intensely homebrewed. I'll put a link in the description as soon as it gets cleared for public consumption by D&D Beyond. 4 weary bounty hunters entered an empty tavern. The previous night's revelries washed away by Arnold clear on its keep, and most of the patrons busy outside protecting the perimeter of the village from a wraith attack. On his way in, one of the adventurers, Wades in Shadows, spotted some bone dice behind the counter.
A friendly game?
Split dice your house.
Split dice.
All right, let's play.
And so with that, Arnold and Wades began to roll dice, playing Giants and Halflings, a game from Desrin Valley. They traded drinks, gold, and stories into the
I
night.
heard a rumor about the unmasked lord's daughter, the one about the pig and the peanut butter. 4 years ago when I got here, it was run by an orc. But frost goblins ate the bastard. Now it's mine.
When I woke up to relieve myself, I fell face first into the side of my tent and went rolling down the ravine.
No!
The little bastard had numbed and cut off our feet. Took 3 days to get back to town, and when we did, we found out he'd framed us for
You say he's down there now?
Yeah, with the Wraiths.
Well, cheers to that. A toast to the crow. May sweet William feast on his bones.
Come on, Wades, you got this.
The maw.
Have you ever seen one of these?
Where'd you get that, Shadows? You want to put it down on a bet, double or nothing? Win your money back?
What is it?
Well, a long time ago, when these cliffs were but boiling waters around an archipelago, there was a creature that lived in the sea caves. Its worshippers, the Grey Orcs, they wore that pendant.
You seem to know an awful lot about...
Learned it from Brom, the priest. I canned it from the texts. In here rambling about elemental chaos, chained god, entropy, you know, that sort of thing. You want to know more, you should ask him. I met in the morning!
And with that, Dave and Wades in Shadows drunkenly stumbled to Father Brum's house.
Hey, Father.
Father Brum. Wakey, wakey. Hey, creepy priest.
Hey, it's me, Dave.
I'm gonna play my drum until you come out. I'm playing it!
Father Brum. Get off your bum. We have some questions.
You said I was marked with the curse. Well, I curse you with a bad night's sleep.
Start hanging in here.
Who disturbs me in the dark?
We want to know what this is.
I will give you 2 platinum bars. You will give me the amulet. And we will never speak of this night again.
We're not here to give you this freaking necklace.
Just tell us what it does, or I'll destroy it.
How dare you?
Smash it, Dave, now!
I'll do it.
Give
Okay, here you go.
and be gone.
I'm not mad. I am just extremely pissed off and disappointed.
How'd it go?
Dave gave him the amulet.
It was a spell. How was I supposed to?
Oh, did he cast a spell? Well, then I guess it's all right. Everything's fine, isn't it, Dave? You're an idiot.
The party slept, drank, and when a hungover Dave woke up the following morning in a particularly vicious sunbeam, he noticed that it was reflecting off of one of the Ulrithnar's shields. And suddenly, he put it all together.
The Wraiths. It's a mirror puzzle. Can you get the Commodus?
Since Commodus was connected with the Ulrithnar, he was the one sent out to go and collect shields. They would need as many as they could get to extinguish the Wraiths in the ice caves below.
Anyway, so, all right, my neighbor is hammering something for no fucking reason. So we're just going to accept that it's going to be part of the recording. Also, thanks to Peter O'Morgan for voicing Wades and Shadows. You can find his socials in the description. And thanks to my wife, Hilletje Moller Bashew, for voicing the Wraiths. Now, if you enjoyed this, there's another episode coming out this Friday. And after this Friday, actually, it should probably be on screen right now if it's already released. So keep an eye out. Maybe subscribe if you haven't already. Do the little bell thing. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.